Hi everyone, it's Monique and I'm back with another project for Wild Orchid Crafts on behalf of their YouTube design team, The Wild Bunch. So for my next project I did a mini album, and mini albums are one of my favorite projects to work on, so I had a lot of fun with this one. The paper line that I used is the London Market by Pink Paisley, and I used the 6x6 stack here. I created the covers using chipboard. So I used the paper collection on the front cover, actually on both covers. Got a Tim Holtz ornate plate here, and I did put antique white acrylic paint on it and then wiped it off with a paper towel. So there's a bit of antique white in all the grooves there. The corners here, I used the small filigree silver corners, and you can see how bright these corners are. So I actually used some alcohol ink to tone them down and make them look more of a pewter color. And then I again put the off-white acrylic or the antique white acrylic paint on it and wiped off with the paper towel, and it really brings out the detail in the corners. So on the binding, actually the binding is hard, and I used the deck method by Laura Dennison. I wrapped this seam binding around the center. This is just seam binding from my stash, which I had already stained using tattered rose and antique linen distress stains. And on top here I layered, this is the Ivory Guipure lace, and you've seen a lot of the design team members using this. This lace, you guys, is absolutely gorgeous. I love using it. So yeah, you can expect to see that in more of my upcoming projects. Here I just edged the edge of the lace using the flat back ivory pearl string in 4mm size, this guy here. And I used some dark brown skeleton leaves behind the flower arrangement, along with the gold crystal drops on the gold stems, and this is one of my favorite products from the store right now. I'm having a lot of fun with that one. I've got a hip rosebud here, and that is from the mixed white cream tone pack. And what I did was I just used some tattered rose distress ink on the edges of the petals, and then I spritzed it with some of my Lindy Stamp Gang. I've got this is a 5mm, it's one of these 5mm closed rosebuds in ivory, and I gave it the same treatment as the hip rosebud. The main flower here is one of the 40mm off-white trellis roses, and I edged that with brushed corduroy and spritzed it with a lot of gold, so it's very, very shimmery. This here is a one of the small curly wild roses from the mixed color pack, and it's actually the one, it's got champagne with pink tips. Beautiful, beautiful coloring on these, and this coloring comes in a variety of different styles of flowers. And right in here I have a little sweetheart blossom tucked in there, and it's just an ivory one, and I didn't add any color to it at all. I actually left it white, but I did color the center using some of my Perfect Pearls, and you've seen me do this in other videos. I just mix it with water to create a paint, and I paint that center piece. I've added a couple more leaves here. This larger one is actually one of the 40mm white leaves, and I just colored it with some distress ink and Lindy Stamp Gang sprays. And the other green leaf is this two-tone rose leaf in the 30mm size. So if I flip this over and look at the back I left quite plain, but I used some of the same products. I've got the Guipure lace here, the flat back pearls, and two more of those silver corners there. I like to leave the back of my minis fairly plain so that they sit on a desk really easily, and I'll actually stamp in here my personal stamp and sign and date it. So if you open it up, I just left the inside cover blank. This next page, I actually created a pocket here using a piece of burlap, and on the burlap I layered this white organza rose trim, the large, and it's got this beautiful little silver sparkle on the edge of the petals, which is quite pretty. I've got two of the 30mm two-tone rose leaves. This here is one of the Filigree Antique Gold flower embellishments. And I've also included some of the mixed pearl stamens here on the edge of the flower. This button and the twine in the center is actually from my stash. I've included a couple of tags here. This is one of the journaling tickets from Tim Holtz. This here is just a downloaded ticket that I printed off and attached some of my seam binding from my stash to. In each of the pockets here I created a tag, and I won't pull them all out, but I normally put a journaling spot with a little bit of stamping and then paper from the collection, and these are the new tabs from Tim Holtz, so I just have one of those in each pocket. Each of the pages I just used a piece of cardstock and created a tube. Thought that was the easiest way to go. So on this page here I used just a small strip of burlap to create a little pocket to hold a couple of tags. On this strip I layered some flowers here. The bottom two layers are actually from an old doily, and the next two layers are one of them is the 35mm foundation white blooms, and there's also the white blooms in 25mm on top here. Again, I used distress inks to color them up. I used tattered rose and brush corduroy throughout the album. Up here I've got a couple of the rosebuds, the closed rosebuds. I have one in 5mm and one in 4mm. I've layered a couple of the leaves here. This one here is the 40mm white leaf, which I colored using distress ink and Lindy's sprays. This one here is actually the 30mm two-tone rose leaf. And then this is one of the petals from one of these Filigree Antique Gold flower embellishments. Sorry for the glare, you guys. The next page here is pretty simple. I just adhered this clip to the binding. I put glossy accents on this gramophone and then just clipped a tag in there. So that, again, is pretty simple. Here's another tag in the end which has the paper from the collection on one side and journaling spot on the other. This side here I used a piece of craft paper, and this is an EK Success punch, to create a pocket here for a couple of tags. This here's seam binding from my stash, and I used the tattered rose distress stain to color that. On top here is on top of the craft paper here is some of the natural cotton lace from Wild Orchid Crafts. I've then layered a variety of the blooms. I've got some of these 45mm foundation blooms. I've got a couple of those. Again, I have one of the 35mm blooms, and last I have the 30mm white foundation bloom here. You can see I'm almost out of these. I then used, this is just like a flower bead cap and a brad from my stash. On either side of this flower here I have two of the Sweetheart blossoms in ivory, and I left those white and just colored the stamens again using my Perfect Pearls. This side here I layered two of the 25mm white blooms. I colored one with tattered rose and one with brush corduroy distress ink, and I put a Sweetheart blossom in the center. You might have seen me use these in other projects. These are the large silver padded butterfly embellishments. I really like these. These are cute. I kept them silver throughout the album, but they're really easy to ink up and change. And here I've got a couple more of the leaves. The lighter colored one is this 20mm two-tone rose leaf, and the darker colored one, is these little 15mm green rose leaves. I just love using a variety of sizes of leaves. I think I have all the different sizes from Wild Orchid Crafts. Again, another tag with a piece of the paper on one side, and you'll have to trust me, the journaling lines on the other side. This page here, this is a Tim Holtz word band, Capture Life's Moments, and I just used some twine and seam binding from my stash, with a couple of rhinestone brads from my stash as well. So I just included these tags in the pocket there. This one is a downloadable, and this is from the Tim Holtz journaling tickets. Here I kept the flower arrangement pretty simple. I have a little sweetheart blossom here again with the stamen painted. I have a 4mm and a 5mm rosebud. And here is just one of the 15mm green rose leaves. On this side here, I used burlap again to create a pocket on the end of my page here, and tucked a couple of tickets in there. Those are both downloaded from Marion Smith. I used some seam binding from my stash that had been dyed using the Tattered Rose Distress Stain. And here I've created an arrangement with, there's two leaves there. Those are the 30mm two-tone rose leaves, and this is a new product that I haven't used before. It's one of these small resin cameos here. I've got those are mixed pearl stamens, and again a couple more of the blooms here. The bottom one is the 35mm, and the top one is bottom one is 35mm, top one is a 25mm, and again using brushed corduroy and Tattered Rose Distress inks around the edges of the petals. This is another one of those metal bead caps that I have from my stash, and just a gold brad from my stash. Have another tag in the end here. And this page I kept pretty simple as well. I decided to use two of these Filigree silver corners, and I left the ends open so you could just tuck a tag in them, so I quite like that. On this page I decided to put the pocket along the bottom of the page using some burlap from my stash, and I layered some of the Guipure cream lace over top of that with some of the 4mm ivory pearl string on the edge of that. The corner here I've layered a couple of the rose leaves. This again is a 40mm white leaf, which I've colored, and the other one is a 30mm two-tone rose leaf. I also have one of the 45mm white foundation blooms under one of the antique gold filigree flower embellishments. And the center here I used another button from my stash with some twine from my stash, and in the corner here I put another one of those large silver padded butterflies. And I just printed this tag out. It's another downloadable tag, and again another tag in the end of the page. This page here again is simple. I put glossy accents on the stamp, and I adhered this. Here is a crown from the Ideology line of Tim Holtz, and this is just a flip up little booklet with a couple of picture mats in there, and I have a magnet holding it closed. So on this page I decided to create just a simple photo mat, and I added glossy accents to this moth in the corner just to add a little bit of dimension. This cluster here, I again used a variety of the leaves. This is a 40mm white leaf. This one here is the 30mm two-tone rose, and this is the small 15mm green rose leaf. These blooms here, I actually layered 2 of the 38mm foundation white blooms, and I colored one using tattered rose and one using brushed corduroy, and then I layered it with one of the 30mm white blooms and a pearl from my stash. And on the last page I created another burlap pocket along the bottom, put a couple of tags in here. The center flower is a combination of the 45mm, 35mm, and 30mm flowers. Sorry, the white blooms. I have here 4 of the 5mm closed rosebuds, 2 of the sweetheart blossoms, and on either side here I have one of the 30mm and one of the 20mm two-tone rose leaves underneath the sweetheart blossoms. And the back cover I just left blank. So I hope you like the mini album. If you're interested, I'll have a list of all the Wild Orchid Craft products that I used in this mini album in the description box below. And please go check out the Wild Orchid Crafts channel. There's projects showing up there every day from all the other design team members. So go check it out. Thank you so much for watching and have a great night.